Praise is when you get positive feedback for something you did that the other person values. So when a teacher praises a student, the student is getting positive feedback for something the student did that the teacher values. But kids value positive comments from their teachers. So students will put on the behavior in order to get the positive comment from the teacher. That's praise. When you get approval, approval is positive feedback for something you did that you value. If you go back to my comments yesterday with my backwards planning, I made this statement. A school will not get maximum student achievement until it becomes collegiate. Approval builds collegiality. So if you want to build a collegial team within your department, within your form, within your school, within a community, one of the keys to building a collegial team is the ability for people to give approval to each other. One of the problems with teachers working in isolation behind closed doors, they receive little approval. So most of the time that teachers hear from us is when we want them to change something. We want something more from them. We're dissatisfied with something. That's generally when they hear from the school. Or teachers end up getting praise. Now make sure you hear this. Praise isn't bad, but praise doesn't build ego. Receiving praise does not build your ego. Receiving praise reinforces your behaviors. Receiving approval builds your ego. Coaching for growth means you're trying to get people to make themselves vulnerable. Anytime I make myself vulnerable, I'm putting my ego at risk. So the more you build my ego, the more I can put myself at risk. If you think about students coming into your classrooms in the next couple of days, you're going to have some students walk in who have low self-esteem. Therefore, they won't take risk as learners. So your first job is in building their self-esteem. Praise won't build their self-esteem. Praise will give them positive feedback for behaviors. Approval is what builds their self-esteem. So the more that teachers can give each other approval, the more we can build that risk-taking across the faculty and build collegiality. Now, when you go from compliments to praise to approval, coming down this way takes increased knowing. So you got to know a little bit more. Now, this is tough. To give approval, it means I don't only have to know what you did, I need to know what you value. So my guess is, as the kids show up here in the next couple of days, you will be spending time the first couple of days of school to know your students better. The more you know what your students value, the more you are effective as an encourager, as a motivator of your students. When you don't know your students' value systems, you can't build connections with them. So now coaching creates the opportunity for us to get to know each other better. So in the post-conference, I want to be in a position to give approval to someone. So that means back in my pre-conference, I'm asking questions to uncover their agenda, to uncover something that I might be able to give them approval for. So part of the pre-conference is listening for something this person values. Words are important to people. So one of the things I'm doing when I'm writing down is I'm using their words. And when it's not their words, I check it out. So when she was describing wacky, I came back and said playful focus. And she said, oh, I really like that. Well, I'm going to write that down. I'll come back to this again. When you're being evaluated, the evaluator uses the words of the system. They use the words of the evaluation instrument. Coaches use the words of the teacher. Now, yesterday, when you finished the pre-conference, I showed you the listening test. And I told you that the first 2 questions on the listening test were required. So the required question is, you believe that? And we practiced that one yesterday. So looking at Jackie's, you believe that learning grammar in English takes a lot of repetition and practice. And kids don't like repetition and practice, so you need to create an environment where that happens. Okay? That would mean you believe that. Okay? Then, focus. Focus is the job she gave me. So the job that Jackie gave me is looking at flow and how her organization helps the flow. That's my focus. Now, yesterday I told you that those first 2 were required. I told you that the third one is extra credit. You don't have to do the third one, but you can build rapport faster if you can fill in that blank, I should notice. What goes in that blank is this piece here that you just did. So once I know that Jackie values playful focus, I know that in the pre-conference. So what do I do during my observation? I go looking for examples of playful focus. One more skill. Some of you already spotted in my modeling that besides the questions I ask, you also identified that I use something known as a paraphrase. The title I use for it is a confirmatory paraphrase. Now, most of you have probably studied this in some kind of active listening training. They may not have called it paraphrasing, they may have called it an active listening skill. What you're doing with paraphrasing is rather than asking the person a question, you're making a statement based on something you heard. Now, if any of you have studied non-directive counseling, in non-directive counseling, when they paraphrase, they only say the exact words that the person said. What I'm talking about here is a little bit different. I'm saying I'm listening to you, I'm looking at your body language, I'm hearing your tone of voice, and to some degree I know you. So when you speak, I take all those things and I put them together to figure out the meaning of what it was you said. And then rather than asking you a question, I deliver it back as a statement. Now, I'm going to share that you can paraphrase people's facts, the facts and what they're saying. You can paraphrase the attitude or the feeling, and then I'll talk to you about intention and commitment. Okay. Let me give you a concrete example. I told you I taught grade 1. Boys and girls, it's time to go to the library get your library books. Mr. Barkley, my mommy wouldn't let me bring my library book. I'd look at the child and go, you forgot your book. You didn't have to teach grade 1 very long to figure out that most of the time mommy wouldn't let me means I forgot, okay? But here's the power. One day it happened. Mr. Barkley, my mommy wouldn't let me bring my library book. You forgot your book. No, I was standing at the door. She ripped it out of my hand. She said, we're not finished with that yet. Hey. Okay? You see, you don't have to always be right with the confirmatory paraphrase. When it's wrong, when you're wrong, it allows the person to correct you. Okay? That's the value of the paraphrase is when you're listening to people, you're making meaning inside your head. So the paraphrase is the chance for you to take the meaning you think you've reached and play it back out. Okay? Right. So the student says, I'm never going to get this, it's just too hard. Paraphrasing feelings. You're worried about failing the course. You're embarrassed to be struggling in the class. Confirmatory paraphrase of feeling. Okay? Confirmatory paraphrase of attitude. You think this takes more skill than you believe you have. Attitude. You're thinking of quitting. Attitude. Student, I'm not going to make a speech in front of the class. I don't want to. Confirmatory paraphrase of feeling. Speaking in front of a group frightens you. Confirmatory paraphrase of feeling. You're afraid some students will laugh. Confirmatory paraphrase of attitude. You think giving a speech is a waste of your time. Confirmatory paraphrase of fact. You're unprepared to give the speech. Feeling, attitude, fact. All different choices you could make based on listening and knowing. Give you examples. It's frustrating to put so much time into planning a lesson and then not have it go well. Here's some confirmatory paraphrases I might use. Confirmatory paraphrase of fact. You spent a lot of time planning. Stop, let the teacher talk. And they look at you and go, almost 15 minutes. Or they might look at you and go, hours, all weekend. But see, all you're doing is paraphrasing. Okay? You're not saying it's a lot, they're saying it's a lot. So you put a lot of time into planning, allows them to respond back to you. Okay? Confirmatory paraphrase of fact. The kids did not respond the way you predicted they would. Confirmatory paraphrase of fact. The students were unable to do the problems at the end of the class. Okay? Confirmatory paraphrase of feeling. You're angry about how the kids responded. You're embarrassed that I was observing. You're upset by the outcome you received. Confirmatory paraphrase of attitude. You believe your planning time was wasted. Confirmatory paraphrase of attitude. You think this should be easier. Here's my finding. In a perfect situation, it tends not to matter whether you question or paraphrase. So in a lot of settings, if I said, you're angry, paraphrase, or I said, are you angry? Question, it might not make a difference. In other words, I can find out what they're thinking either way. Okay? But at times, questions tend to communicate authority. So the board questions the head of school. The head of school questions the principals. The principals question the teachers question the kids. The kids kick the dog because there's nobody lower than a kid to question.